Hi everyone, you're watching PhoneArena's in-depth video review of the Dell Streak 7. It's the latest tablet from Dell's camp, and it's available right now through T-Mobile with a contract price of $200, so it's pretty reasonable. And on top of that, it sports a no-contract price of only $450, and it has some nice specs, such as a dual-core Tegra 2 chipset. It has HSPA Plus connectivity with T-Mobile, and a lot of neat features, and it's running Android 2.2 Froyo. The design of the Dell Streak 7 is no different from the original Dell Streak and shares a lot of commonalities. You have the slope edges, so it gives you a pretty good grip in the hand. It's constructed out of this black glossy plastic, which does attract a little bit of fingerprints, but it's pretty smooth and it's very durable. And the back has this pattern design to it. It's not that large at all, pretty manageable to hand, easy to hold with one hand. There's a little bit of weight to it, you could feel it, but it does make the device feel very sturdy. Although it packs a reasonably sized 7-inch capacitive touchscreen, we're not that thrilled about its low resolution. It's actually WVGA 480 by 800 pixels, so it's kind of slim in terms of detail versus some other similar tablets on there in the market. And we have a little bit of difficulty, especially with web browsing, just making out the tiny text on there. As far as color output, it seems to be natural, but it does suffer from some poor viewing angles. So especially when you hold it in portrait, you kind of lose visibility of what's on screen. On the right edge of the tablet, you have your usual set of Android capacitive buttons. You got the back, menu, and home. They're pretty large, and on top of that, we rarely accidentally press them. Meanwhile, on the left edge of the tablet, you got the 3.5mm headset jack, the left speaker. On the opposite side, you have the right speaker, and underneath this plastic flap, you get access to both the SIM card and also SD card slots. Well, on the bottom, you have the proprietary charging port and data connection port there. On the top edge, you have the dedicated power button. It's fairly raised, same thing as the volume rocker, and they have a really good tactile response when you're pressing down. Finally, in the rear, we find its 5-megapixel autofocus camera. There's a chrome trim around it, and also the LED flash. Unfortunately, though, you can't have access to the battery with this one. Relying on a 1 GHz dual-core NVIDIA Tegra 2 processor, it makes for a decent platform experience. It's pretty smooth in its operation, but not as fluid versus some of the other Tegra 2 devices out there in the market. We have a live wallpaper activated here, and it does kind of strain under the pressure a little bit when it's running, but nonetheless, it gets the job done. Even though it doesn't provide the most up-to-date Android tablet experience, Dell's Stage UI running on top of Android 2.2 Froyo on the Dell Streak 7 is a pretty respectable experience on its own. The neat thing about it is the Dell Stage widgets here. They encompass a pretty sizable chunk of space on the home screens, and they offer a lot of useful functionality, such as the social networking one here, where you could post messages to your Twitter and Facebook accounts. You have even another one here for your music. It displays all the music albums. You have even the one for your home screen, which shows you the most recent apps, and you have one for the web. For those with larger fingers, you'll probably find the landscape keyboard to be a little bit on the cramped side, but luckily though, you can tell it's pretty responsive with its operation. On top of that, it also sports the swipe keyboard, so if you're more used to this intricate way of typing text, you have that option as well. And in portrait, it's a little bit pretty decent as far as moving around, just because your thumbs pretty much are able to encompass the entire keyboard. The Gmail experience is pretty satisfying, of course, much like any other Android device out there in the market. You have your full arsenal of stuff, and setup is not a problem at all. Generally requires your username and password. Mainly because of its support for Flash, you get a really engaging experience. The kinetic scrolling is smooth, as you can tell. You have double tap to zoom in. Pinch gestures are pretty responsive as well. And overall, we find the experience to be fitting just because of the large display of the tablet. The video playback experience is pretty good just because it moves at a decent frame rate. The video we have here is encoded in DivX 1280 by 720 resolution. There is a little bit of pixelation going on with it, some graininess, but overall at least the speed is pretty responsive and quick. With its 5-megapixel autofocus camera, we're not all too thrilled about its average-looking output. First of all, in outdoor conditions, it's not as sharp as we would like it. And on top of that, it produces some cooler-looking colors, and every now and then, depending on where you're shooting or the angle, it kind of looks overexposed. 720p video recording is of course on board with the Dell Streak 7, but unfortunately though its quality is pretty appalling. It shoots at a consistent frame rate of 30 frames per second, but there's just a lot of artifacting going on, especially when you move really quickly. On top of that, details are very slim. It just looks pretty muddy overall. Seeing that this is an HSPA Plus enabled device, we're treated to some really fast speeds, both upload and download. And on top of that, it's able to manage a solid connection to the net. Unfortunately, though, one of the biggest Achilles heel to the Dell Streak 7 is its poor battery life. In heavy usage, we only managed to get 5 hours out of the battery before it required a charge, and with light usage, we only managed to get 10 hours, so it's less than a single day versus the other comparable tablets out there in the market. Easily the best thing about the Dell Streak 7 is its combination high-end specs such as the 1 GHz dual-core NVIDIA Tegra 2 processor, its HSPA Plus connection, and on top of that, combining it with the relatively affordable price point. It's $200 on contract or $450 off contract, so it does a pretty good job in that aspect. Although some people might not like the Dell Stage UI, some people will like it just because of its usefulness, but all in all, it still offers you all the essentials of any Android tablet. So if you'd like to learn more about the Dell Streak 7 or for all the latest cell phone reviews, news, specs, and information, you can check us out, PhoneArena.com.